I'm Duff Hearon. John was a very good friend. I see this regular place of worship with him, and now I'm certain he's in very good hands. I look at Kirsten's family and know that Brady and Beckett have someone with whom they were so proud, but also was so proud of them. For you that don't know Brady and how smart a boy he is, I know I've been told he's in the GATE program at PUSD, certainly out of the Paul for the year. Right, Beckett brought happiness to the family. I'm very honored that I was asked, as I understand, by John and Bruce too, to speak today. He was a wonderful friend, serious professional, but a fun and funny guy, and the video certainly now makes that apparent for all of us to see in so many ways. We knew him in so many different ways. He had that belly laugh. He had the wonderful feeling he brought into a room, a feeling that was always made you enjoy being with him. You wanted to work with him on whatever project, whatever thing it was, because he brought his ethic, but also his just positive attitude into the room. Never looked back, he always looked forward. Everybody that was with him was working forward to do the things that he wanted to do and they wanted to do for the community, because that's what he was about, his community. And I know that it has to come through the family, that Midwest ethic. He had a demeanor that was engaging, and it came, I think, from his roots. He had the Chicago work ethic that was just core to him. It was the first thing I noticed when I started to work with him on things. And there was always, of course, his Cubs and the Bears. When anything was in doubt, any problem too hard to overcome, there was Mike Ditka, who would be there. And we knew that from John. Kirsten, you told me the story that the boys were able to go with John to Wrigley Field and see his Cubs. I hope there's hundreds of pictures. They'll get you through some tough times. They'll get the boys into conversation to know his dad. I lived in Chicago at the beginning of my career. There's nothing like a Cubs fan. I learned what it was to really be a fan, not just this good fair weather fan. I learned words like June swoon. There's always next year. There's always stolen from the Cubs. Maybe somebody in left field was going to do it the next time. That was John. He was not a fair weather fan. He was always a fan. He did everything. He worked so hard for his community. He cared so much about it. And while I knew John through his career, I know that there was an intersection of that career that brought him his family. And Wayne Lundberger and the Catalina Tool and Mold Company was where Kirsten was able to meet John because of the work she did at GTech back in those days. But I started working with John when he was a young pup in the early 90s, working in economic development. And he was in charge of raising a great deal of money. And he was just starting, and here he was thrown into this and not really very high up on the pecking order even within the organization. But John took it on, and I was a volunteer businessman who was trying to open doors. Well, he broke down. When I would introduce him to somebody, he'd immediately be involved and do what all good people who raise money do. They first fundraise and then they fundraise. John did that. And I would give him leads sometimes. Even after a while, I would just say, well, here's my Rolodex. Back in the day with Rolodex. And John grabbed on, and he would come back and he would present, well, here's what we talked about. What do you think? And I would talk to him about the person. And John would always figure out the way that they would give the most to the cause. in order that we could carry out our mission as volunteers. And that was a wonderful introduction to John, and you know, his boss figured out real quickly, this is the guy to look at. This guy can really do things, and so he made him the number 2 person very quickly. And I think within the office sometimes he was the operational officer that was number 1. He did so many things. And the people around him always look at him as not just a colleague, but a friend, because that's the way he brought his thoughts to them. That he was wanting to work with them and make things happen for the community. So let's do this as a team. And like a good coach, he would bring them along and work with them and make them be the best they could be. Well, what are some words that I'll use for John? I'll tell you what, doer is the first word I would say of John. Yes, he made all the big long trips all over the world to try to bring in clients, but doing was what he really felt best at. And he had another one, I call it a Johnism, big hairy ideas. He thought this was a community that really needed to look for big goals. It was a special place. He had stayed here after his college days. He could have gone back to Chicago, but no, he wanted to be here. This is his place, and I know that he wanted to build a community where his boys would grow up and have their careers and family. I love the greeting that John had. It was something that really said a lot about him, and the last words I heard just a few weeks ago as we were talking on the phone. Everybody knows it. Cheers. So I'll leave you with how John might say it if you were here today for me, which is the way it should be. I think John would say, God bless you. I say, God bless you, John, and welcome you to strong words. God doesn't hug you, boy, am I in trouble. So to John, cheers.
Well, looking at that video, I didn't realize what a cool dude John was when he was younger. Thank you for coming today, and what a wonderful expression of love and respect for our dear friend John. I'm Bruce Wright. John and I have been friends and colleagues for more than 20 years. The 2 past weeks have been sad ones for all of us. John's passing was so sudden and unexpected, and it's hard to believe he's not here. Yesterday I was talking to Kirsten, and I asked her if she was ready for the service, and she said, I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what to do. And I share her feelings. I do a lot of public speaking, but this is really hard. And I usually don't operate from a text, but today I'm going to have to rely on that to get through this. But as I told Kirsten yesterday, today is the day to celebrate the life of John Grabo, a wonderful man. I spent a couple of days trying to think about what I should say about John. Was there a word or a phrase that would capture his essence? Cheers does it really well. But I came up with the idea of big. John was physically a big man. When he put on his red U of A polo shirt, he was a moving billboard for the Wildcats. You know, when John bought a new truck, he bought a big truck. He needed it to fit in. He was only outdone by our colleague Ken Marcus, who was here, who had built by a bigger one. And when he and Ken and Patrick Marcus would park their trucks together at the tech park, it looked like Fort Laud Chicken getting ready to stage a land assault. A year ago, John and I had the great good fortune to go to Israel with Naomi Weiner and Eduardo Sabreda to try to recruit technology companies to the tech park. And the last night we were there, we had a wonderful dinner at a Tel Aviv restaurant on the beach. And after dinner, we walked up to a taxi cab stand to catch a taxi back to the hotel. And there was only one taxi available, a little tiny green Fiat. And as we approached the taxi driver looked at us with bewilderment, and Naomi said, there is no way we're going to fit in that taxi. And in typical John fashion, he says, come on, we can do it. So Eduardo, Naomi, and I piled in the back seat, because John would only fit in the front seat. Well, sort of. Struggled to wedge himself into the front seat. However, he had to hang his head in his right arm out beside glasses and window. We must have been quite a sight as we traveled back to the hotel, and nobody was more amused and laughed more than John. John was a man with a big voice. Duff has referred to that. He loved making presentations, and he was great doing them. He would have made a great sportscaster for the Cubs. I can still hear that voice and that great laugh down at the other end of the hallway. As Duff indicated, John was a man of big ideas. He loved to develop the big concepts and put them into plans and present those plans, and he would beam when that happened. You know, he helped us develop some really big projects at the tech park, like the solar zone and our business attraction program, Global Advantage. He also loved words. John would say in 5 paragraphs what the rest of us would say in 5 sentences, and he loved words. And he had all those really great phrases. He had this peculiar Midwest Canadian accent. I don't know where it came from, but we use words like process and organization. And I know that if my remarks strike him today as being good, he'll say they were spot on. As Duff indicated, John was a big sportsman. He rooted for the Wildcats and the Bears and for his beloved Cubs. And as Duff said, he wasn't a fair weather fan. And that was true of John in his life. When he was committed to you, he was loyal and he stuck with you. John loved working on the big stage. He loved anything international. I had the great fortune to travel with him all around the world. To Ottawa with John and Bob Rowe, to Manchester and Berlin with Bob Waka, to Paris and Lyon with Robert Gonzalez, to Mexico with the Seltners, to Israel on 2 trips with the American-Israel Friendship League. And in every instance, John would do his homework and study the local culture, and he tried to learn a few sentences in his native language that he could use in his presentations. He always wanted to have that authentic cultural experience. In Manchester one time, he found out that the city was around soccer for football. And I remember spending 2 hours walking the streets of Manchester from one sports store to another, trying to find a Manchester United jersey that would fit him. We finally did it, but it was a snug fit. And then he insisted on going to a local pub to watch the Manchester United Manchester City game on the television. 3 hours later, there was John, one of the boys, singing Manchester United fight songs and drinking a bunch of Guinness. John was a man of big character, the ultimate professional, a man of faith. He knew what was right and wrong. He and I spent hours and hours discussing, debating, arguing about politics and sports. John was a Republican. He loved the Cubs. I'm a Democrat. I love the Raiders. He was convinced I had crossed over to the dark side. I will miss those conversations more than you can know. But most of all, John was a big family man. Kirsten and the boys were his life, his passion. He could not think of anything he would want to do more than to be at home with the boys, cooking a big, thick steak on the barbecue. John, you made a big impact on Tucson. You made a big impact on all of us who knew you in Tucson. Tucson is a better place because of your efforts in economic development. But we are all better people because you were a great husband, a loving father, a wonderful colleague, and a loyal friend. We will miss you in a big way. To Brady and Beckett, you have big footsteps to follow. In several years, when you're missing him and you look back on this day, remember how much he was loved and respected by his friends. And Kirsten, we're all here for you in a big John Grabo way.